G'day folks, this is Shroom, your host for the Shroom Light podcast. Tonight I've got a guest, his name is Jason Wilson, and he's going to be talking about chasing yellowfin bream in the Botany Bay, Georges River system. That's a system that's close to my heart, so I'm quite interested to see what he's got to say. He is an active bream tournament angler who likes to try new lures and techniques in his pursuit of refining his approach. He's also a father, but he still finds the time for our lovely sport. So without further ado, let's welcome Jason to Shroom Live.
G'day, Shroom. G'day all the listeners. G'day the followers. How are you going, all right?
I think they're going to be all right tonight, Jason. I think they've been frothing at the opportunity to listen to this podcast. I think a few people here especially have told me they've been looking forward to another bream one, so I got to put up my hand and say that I'm one of those people as well. So let's just basically just start off and just talk about, bream in general, on what that species just means to you.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. With bream, for a few years, I've chased a lot of fish and didn't necessarily know where I wanted to take my fishing. I've done a lot of fishing, throwing a lot of different lures at them and being quite successful. And I think one day I was going through the worm on YouTube and just seeing what was out there, and I come across a ABT bream tournament, and I watched it and seen the opportunities of all the different lures that they were throwing and all the different ways they were catching bream, whether it was plastics, topwater, chubbies, even micro swim baits as well, little flick baits, and I had a talk with a few of the guys that I work with down at Complete Angler there, and they were really raving on that a few of them had done a lot of bream fishing before. So I ended up buying my first light tackle spin combo and getting out. And on the first session, I did absolutely rubbish. But as a fisher, you have those days, and I just kept on coming back for more and started getting the technique down. And so the rest is history. Has just been really focusing on bream from there. So really enjoying it lately, actually.
Yeah, Jason, that just basically just indicates why a lot of people chase bream. They're not the easiest species to tempt, are they, on lures? It takes a lot to get one.
Patience is a virtue, mate. Absolutely, especially when it comes to bream. I heard something one day where someone had said to me, if you think you're fishing slow, fish even slower. And that's really stuck with me, especially for bream, and that made complete sense as to how some days they can be so finicky, where you drop your leader from 6 pound down to 5, down to 4, and even some days down to 3, and they'll only bite on your 3 pound and bust you off 70% of the time. So yeah, it does. There is a lot of different ways and a lot of different techniques to chase them, and I think that's why I really enjoy it.
Excellent, Jason. Look, everything you touched on there, I really want to get straight into it, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to set the scene a little bit. I'm just going to ask you this question here, and it goes according to these lines. If someone was going to ask you to basically just summarize the type of angler that you are in terms of your approach, how would you describe that?
As long as I'm on the water, whether it be on the boat, land-based, I think fishing is good for the mind. So the type of angler that I am is, mate, give me a rod and a reel and a place and a time, and I'll be there. Doesn't matter what we're chasing, I'll be there for sure.
What about in terms of, say, setting goals? Like I've heard from you. You told me that one day you set out a goal to catch a 50 centimeter mangrove jack. And then what's the story behind that? I'll let you explain.
As you know, you go through YouTube, you go through the wormhole, and you see different types of fish that others are catching that really excite you. And I think I really want to catch a trophy fish of each fish. So when it comes down to it, traveling is a big thing for me as well. So I love to travel to go catch a decent sized fish. Obviously, we live in the Sydney region, so I'm only in Western Sydney. So um, we can, as being a father of a 2-year-old, you don't really travel all too often anymore. So, but yeah, trying to I guess uh, get the best out of every session that you can. Um, that's the type of fisher that I am, and just go nail a lot of different fish and with a lot of different techniques. That's what type of fisher I am.
Yeah, I think the reason I brought that question up is because I think a lot of anglers share in the same sentiments. They are anglers that like to travel. I mean, who doesn't like going to a new spot, casting into waters unfamiliar to oneself? It's got to be one of the most exciting feelings. And also in fishing, you can sort of take the sport in whatever direction that you really want to take it in. So whether it's through enjoyment or, I want to tick off this species. I want this particular species at this size if you've caught that before.
One thing that I really enjoy about fishing is that you use your knowledge. You use your own knowledge that everyone has their own upbringing to fishing, and you use your own knowledge to go out and target a certain species. And if you can, you can confidently say, look, we're going out and catching, whether it be bream, snapper, jewfish, doesn't matter, but that's what we're going for today. And you can land, that particular fish using the technique that then you know that it gives you a good feeling in the inside that, you've done well.
Yeah, I think so. I just want to say that it doesn't even matter what sort of species that you want to tick off. I can remember not too long ago, I hadn't caught a bonito in my life, and I finally did it. And most people think that that's just not a fish that should be on anyone's sort of achievement list. But yeah, to me, it mattered. It meant something. It was just,
Yeah.
it's just I don't know. I was going to say bundle of joy, but you apply that to a 2-year-old
Yeah.
baby rather than to a fish. But
Well,
it was a torpedo of joy.
yeah, definitely. And then you get a photo with it, and then it creates a memory at the end of the day. So, and I think that's another thing that the fishing is good for is creating memories. So,
Yeah.
that's what I enjoy.
All right. Next question. I'm going to ask you what your last fishing trip was all about.
I told you about this one a couple of weeks ago. So a few weeks ago, we went down to me, my partner, and my kid. We needed to get out of Sydney, so we went down to Lake Eildon with my eyes set on a Murray cod. A lot of things went wrong, and not a lot went right on that trip. And I'm not even talking about the fishing. I was going there with the expectation of not really, getting even a boof from a Murray cod. So on the way down, we got to about Gippsland, and my car started conking it. And
Playing up. Oh, that's no good.
no, we got down to Pakenham, and the car broke down in Pakenham. So I come across a few mechanics that weren't willing to weren't willing to help out. We were stranded. There was this one mob. They called SEDS, SEDS in Pakenham. Absolute bunch of legends. He asked me a couple of questions and said, "Yep, I know what's wrong with it." And 5 minutes later, he had my car fixed and ready to go. So he said he wants my car.
Jason.
Yeah, he said he wanted my car for another hour or so to do whatever he needed to do. At the end of the day, he didn't charge me for it. So he just said, "Enjoy your holiday." So I was fist pumping with that one. We ended up
Jason? Before you go on, who were they again? Let's give them a shout out here on the podcast for doing the right thing.
Shouts to Richard and the boys at SEDS, SEDS, Southeast Diesel Specialists. Absolute legends. We would have been up the creek without a paddle for that in that instance, but they came to the rescue and mate, those boys know what they're doing. So if you ever down those ways and you got a diesel car, mate, take it to them. wouldn't take it to anywhere else in that area. Other than that, we got to Eildon. Finally got there. Where the next day we went sightseeing. That night I went for a fish. Then came back, had to eat, sleep, and refreshed. Got a bit more refreshed, and then went out the next morning. Went to launch the boat, and there's a cord, the cord that you hold on to pull it back to the jetty or the ramp. Ended up snapping, and my boat started floating out into the middle of the river.
Oh, spewing.
Oh, mate, don't even get me started. And so I was knee deep into Lake Eildon, retrieving in the middle of winter, trying to retrieve my boat back. So that wasn't fun, but it's only.
How did that feel like? Just you're now suddenly going into unknown waters with big fish, unknown depths.
Oh, it wasn't necessarily like the unknown waters, like unknown fish. It was just how cold it was, because it's like middle of winter in Victoria.
The temperature
high country.
The water is unbelievable. The coldness,
freezing. So did that. Ended up like electrocuting myself out to the middle of the river to make myself a coffee. Just chilled until like first light started coming, and ended up going to start my motor with the pull cord, and on the third pull the motor cord had snapped.
Can't catch a break.
So that was pretty much like the worst thing. I ended up double uniing the cords together. So
perfect, great.
Because I'm the Bream guy, I had a pair of those Samaki like hook removers you can get nowadays.
I'll do an FG on the cord though.
Oh mate, I'm sure you would. But there wasn't enough cord there to do an FG shroom. I wish I probably would have. That's my go-to knot actually. But the double uni came in handy that day, and so that put me back a little bit, and I ended up jimmying it up. And the retractor broke as well in the motor for where the cord to retract the cord back in. That broke, so I had to manually retract the cord back into the motor, and then pull it. And if it didn't work, I had to retract it again and pull it again. So that was very tedious to have to do all day long. And I did not get to any spots that I had marked on the map that I wanted to go. I ended up having to stay in and around the boat ramp. I think I went into Taylor Bay down there and fished the sticks, but I didn't travel too far from the boat ramp, unfortunately. But other than that,
you shouldn't have. You should be avoiding standing under trees as well. By the sounds of it, you might get struck by lightning with your luck.
Oh, dude, it was trouble. It was one of the worst trips I've ever had. So looking to get out for a fish hopefully tomorrow with my mate Adrian, and we're going to go down the coast and chase some kings. So
excellent.
But to redeem myself.
Jason. I hope that trip goes much better. And
definitely, 100%.
All right, next question. We're gonna start heading into the Bream sort of talk now. So I think what I want to do is ask you a little bit about your tournament Bream fishing experience. Yep. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
So I didn't necessarily want it to go into a tournament without knowing what to do. So it was one of those things that I hadn't been fishing for Bream for too long before I got a whiff of the tournaments. So I ended up going out more and more often and started getting used to it. And I just started, I think you were a big actually inspiration for how to chase Bream on plastics, and watching your YouTube a lot, watching a few other people as well. So But just getting the gist of what to do, what to throw, where to throw it, and doing a lot of like research as well on the internet, reading forums and going from there. So I ended up starting doing pretty good, like catching brim, just on plastics, like a little 2.5 inch grub. That was pretty much, and the minnow. So you got your little your slim swims, and then your bait junkie minnows came out as well. So I was just throwing those around and hitting brim quite frequently. The gulp shrimp and the gulp crabbies were doing pretty good for me as well. So me and my mate Adrian, we actually entered in one year, about not this season's comps, last season. Our first comp was a Hawkesbury comp, and we ended up catching one fish, which was not legal. We ended up we had to release it, obviously. So we went back in with a donut and found out from a few other people that it was pretty difficult that day. But just to be around that atmosphere, just having a chat with a few of the blokes, I think it's such a good atmosphere. All the boys, just a good yarn, just a good chat. It's such a good atmosphere there, so I really enjoy it. And then we did the Botany comp a few weeks, about a month after that, and then from there, throughout the summer, so the winter had ended, and then throughout the summer we kind of just focused on brim, like brim style, like tournament style fishing. So 7 till 2, picking a system and fishing it for brim, and seeing how we went. And over the summer we did all right, but then we kind of started realizing that winter brim and summer brim aren't the same thing. So we were in a bit of a pickle, so we had to really refine our technique again, to chase brim in a tournament style. And this season we're actually doing pretty good. So shouts to Adrian for that, for being my teammate and sticking with us.
I was going to ask you a question about, would you like to elaborate on the differences between summer and winter brim?
Yeah,
from what you've learned?
absolutely. So I think obviously the difference would be the water temperature. I think that's the biggest difference that really affects brim, the behaviour. Which lures you're going to be throwing at them. I think a big thing that I believe in as well is matching the hatch. And I think one of the topics that I wanted to bring up was, over the next 3 months is probably one of my favourite times to chase brim, because we're starting to get out of winter. We're going to be getting out of winter and into spring. So naturally, the when I say match the hatch, when spring comes around, it's prawn season as well. So what you're looking at is just throwing prawns all day, and hopefully, if you put them in the right area, and are patient enough, you'll stick a good brim.
Yeah, awesome. I'm definitely gonna start throwing more prawns as we head into spring. So currently we're still pretty much, I wouldn't say we're at the tail end of winter, but it's sort of still middle-ish by the feels of the temperature in the air. And like you said, the water's pretty cold right now. I can attest to that. Now,
Yep.
that cold water and the fresh, I'm just thinking about a trip that I've had. So, I mean, I can't stand the cold water. I mean, it's so bad that I've had to bring it up.
Get your thermals out, Shroom. Get your thermals out,
Yeah.
mate.
Let's move on and talk a little bit about the Georges River and the Botany Bay system. At least in terms of like how you see it in terms of, how to approach the target of brim.
It all comes down to the weather. So if you've been really, I think the whole Botany Bay, Georges River, and it even counts towards your Sydney Harbour and Parramatta River system as well, because they're almost very similar systems in regards to how they're shaped, or the way they're structured. So you've got Georges River, which is naturally a dirtier system. So whenever I fish, or I did, I'm pre-fishing, or I decide to do a session in that system, um, I'm always taking into consideration the weather leading up to it. If it hasn't been raining, then there's all the more chance that I'll pop into the Georges. So you've got Como, you've got Oatley, you've got a gazillion and one jetties that Brim really enjoy hanging off. And I can tell you right now, there is some big Brim in the Georges River system, because the bait that goes through there, um, to get out of Botany and to hide away. The bream are really healthy in that system, and I've come across some really big bream, really big fish in there. Whether not only just bream, but yeah, I'll go up as far as so even the bridge at Como Pleasure Grounds there is really good. You got a lot of structure that really hold that are really healthy and hold fish. So just depends on what time, I guess, what time of the year, and just leading up to the days there. I guess really help the fishing.
Yeah, I find, yeah, most definitely the Georges River is a little bit more turbid than the Parramatta River system. It's got that mud mixed in. I sort of understand it as it just seems to narrow a bit quicker, but I do see a lot of similarities with the upper Parramatta River system as the Georges. Now, I think Como is still pretty nice usually if you haven't had much rain. It's got that green tinge.
Another, like, I guess it's naturally, like, if you come out of Georges River, like if you're in Georges River, it's still a very murky system. But if you get into Botany, that's when you start getting that nice clear blue water. Um, and same with that Parramatta to Sydney Harbour system as well. So you could really use the same technique for both systems. Well, that's what I do, and I do pretty well. So
Yep. Do you fish all the way up to the weir in the Georges?
I have actually.
Do you
Uh,
enjoy it there?
I have fished at Liverpool train station, just down from that.
Yep.
I've caught a few shopping trolleys. Have a my I haven't been able to pull one in yet, but yeah, I my first time actually down there, I seen a kid was fishing with bread on a treble, and he was fishing for mullet, and he ended up pulling out like a 43 forker brim. And I just seen this brim one day, and I was like, it was thick, like it was, and I hadn't seen anything like it before in my life. So um, it was just, I guess it was one of those really eye openers how big brim can actually get, and they do go all the way down as far as like the weir. It's that's why I think George's is, probably like a system that has really good potential.
Yep. What about in terms of the Botany Bay sort of area then?
Um, So Botany Bay, again, so much structure there, dude. Like heaps of structure. Like you got out the front of Cooks River, you go all the way down to San Souci, you got all those rock walls. You go all the way over the other side, you've got Tierra Flats. You go all the way over the other side again, you've got the port there. Foreshore boat ramp even holds some big brim around there. You've got, places like Molyneux Point. Even if you go out to, um, I guess, just off of the out the front of the sanctuary zone there. There's some wicked flats. There's some wicked weed beds that just hold some massive brim, and they're in numbers all through there. And if you can throw the right lure at the right time, and find what they're eating, you're in for a big day on the brim.
Yeah, awesome. I think that sets the tone for the next question, which is on lures.
Yeah.
So, what sort of lures do you recommend throwing?
Oh, I don't think it's a recommendation of what I recommend throwing. I think it's more a recommendation of what you need to carry with you. And you need, with Brim, what I've found is you need to carry everything from vibes. You need to carry, obviously, your soft plastics. So 2.5 inch minnows, 2.5 inch grubs. If you find yourself at a weed bed, you know, um, have a prawn imitation lure tucked in there. So your MMD, splash prawn, so top water, OSP bent minnows, little chubbies. The thing is with Brim that I've noticed is Brim are everywhere. Um, Brim are everywhere. Obviously, they're going to be more tucked up into structure, but I've caught Brim in the middle of nowhere. On the most random day, I was just throwing the lure, wasn't catching anything, and then hit a Brim, and then ended up just fishing. That really taught me a lot about Brim, is that they're absolutely everywhere. You just got to really find out what they're eating, and once you can find that out, then you just keep throwing that all day long. So yeah, chop and change your lures. If you're land based, obviously just keep casting. If you don't find that you're getting a bite within 20 to 30 minutes, dare say chuck on something different, and chuck that for another 20, 30 minutes and just see what they're biting. And I think that's the best way to go about fishing for Brim across
Yeah,
the
I think
board, really.
maybe a good way to go about this is to just, like you said, the list of brim lures could be pretty inexhaustive. Like you don't know how many there are, so maybe just name one of each type that you recommend or that you think
Um,
would be considered mandatory for a brim angler.
oh, good question. The baby shrimp from Gulp, um, mandatory. Cranky crab,
Yep.
absolutely mandatory. Um, OSP bent minnow in the chart pink color, I think it's called, or the
Yep.
pearl, or either of those. So yeah, I guess they're the three that I'll always have with me. Every time I go out, I go through at least like 7 packets of those gulp shrimps. Um, uh,
Wow. Each session 7 packs.
yeah, mate. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Ask Adrian, mate. We
Those
spend.
toadies in
Yeah.
Sydney.
Just leather jackets, mate. Get to them, and when
Yeah.
you're really fishing them slow, because we've really refined our technique on those as well. Just fishing them super slow, and that's what helps us get the bite. We
Yeah.
tend to find that they get bitten. Um, get yeah, the plastic's not that good, but you're catching fish. So that at the end of the
Yeah.
day, that's the goal.
I think at this stage, I want to go through each of those lures, and of course, within whatever you're comfortable sharing on how you like to use, get the most out of the technique and the sorts of structure that you'd like to throw them at.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the gulp shrimp. Probably my favourite to throw around. Just on like a 16, a 1/16th, depending at the depth, and the current, and wind as well is a big one. So I'll either chuck it on a 1/12th, 1/16th, or a 1/20th jig head. Sometimes even a 1/16th or a 1/28th hidden weight as well.
Yep.
And I like to really fish them super slow, so I can throw them mostly anywhere and everywhere. They tend to do pretty well for me. Another thing, I think a little tip that I've really managed to nail in as well is a lot of the time when you're fishing a grub, or a little minnow plastic, you're twitching up. With a prawn, what you want to do is twitch to the side.
Yep.
Because it creates a more natural presentation, and a natural action for a prawn, and that there everything, natural presentations is everything when it comes to flick and lures, and I think that's where that you're twitching to the side instead of up. Like I always ask myself, like whenever have ever you seen a prawn shoot up in the water column, and it's not too natural in my opinion. So that's where that side twitch comes into it.
Yeah. So about that, I was gonna ask you. So obviously, being a really big, gulp prawn user,
Mm.
what do you think about the I'm just the name just escaped my mind here, but the premium Eco Gear brim prawn. That's sort of very similar plastic. So has that been
Well,
something you've looked at before, and what are your thoughts on that?
absolutely. And it's worked super well for us. As it's another thing that I have in my tackle box for sure. With like a size one um, worm hook, a size one worm hook from BKK,
Yep.
the really thin gauge stuff, and the white speck. Um, and I asked someone, why does this work so well? And they've actually responded because it looks like bird poo. And I kind of like took it in for a second. And one day I was on the water. I can't remember if I was in Botany, but a bird come and like did a poo right next to me, and it hit the water, and a fish has come up and whacked it, and it all just made sense. So
Yep.
I went out and bought a packet of those, but yeah, those do really well as well. I know Steve Morgan does has actually flogged the Oz Open this year and won it on that lure alone. So
Yeah, that's awesome. I have something to add. So Reed Mogridge, previous guest on the Shroom Live, he was talking about some big brim down in Adelaide, and he basically said that he throws white lures under trees because of that same reason that you said, bird poop, and he has also seen big brim come up and hit it. So there is some truth to that belief there.
yeah, I didn't believe it. I was like, yeah, right, whatever. And then one day I actually seen it in the flesh. I seen it happening, and I just I was amazed. I didn't really expect it, so I ended up trying that technique. Where did I try it? I think it was at the back of the marina in. It was in Botany actually. So as you come out of Tom Ugly's and you turn
Yep.
left, there's the big marina sitting there. So ended up trying it in that real shallow water, and it just fluttering down, and seeing some big silver thing come up and absolutely wallop it, and it was a decent mid 30s brim. So yeah, they definitely catch fish too.
I definitely have to employ this technique. There's plenty of bin chickens out in Sydney, so they certainly they certainly excrete their fair amount of these white puddles.
Yeah, let's just call it burley for us lure fishers.
Yeah, yeah. All right, next lure. What was the next one? I think you said it was a cranker crab.
The cranky crab. So cranky crab, in my opinion, number one best hard body lure in Australia. For brim, hands down. I think the way that Steve Steer has really engineered this one, he's done it to a T. You can chuck it on any pylon and let it flutter down, and just thread your line out, thread your line out, thread your line out, and just wind your brim on. They've got really YS25 decoy. I think it's decoy. Correct me if I'm wrong. But decoy hooks, so really thin gauge. So it's always good if you got like a really slow taper rod using a cranker crab. So you don't pull hooks, which I've done on many occasions. But yeah, in my opinion, the cranker crab is probably the hands down the best, one of the best brim lure on the market.
Would you fish them in open water, or is it basically just dropping it down along pylons and sort of free spooling it and loading on?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say free water, like I'm always using my sounder, so always reading what's underneath me. I use Navionics, so as a bit of a spot finder for when I'm not on the water. I'm always trying to find something new, new places that may hold brim. Um, there was a Costa competition, a Costa brim comp a few years back, and a guy jumped on Navionics and found a reef in the middle of Botany, and ended up winning it, fishing there both days, all day, and ended up winning it on the cranky crab. So when you say open water, absolutely, just depends on if there's definitely got to be structure there, and finding something that's around. But as I said before, brim are everywhere. I wouldn't necessarily throw it in the middle of nowhere, because there's a low chance that a brim is going to take something in the middle of nowhere. So I'm more throwing it around structure. But that's just my technique.
Yeah. What about your opinion? I guess this the mussel lure, that's got to be some sort of a similar stock. I mean, it's a completely different lure in
Mm,
design and how it
yep.
works, but the sorts of locations one would utilize that would be very similar. So you'd
Yep.
go the cranker crab. Is that
So
your
we get
viewpoint?
so at Complete Angler we get outback brimmer baits, the muss from them, and I know there's Dane Tomaszewski. I can't pronounce his name for the life of me, but he's a real big avid user of the muss, and go check out his YouTube too. So Zeus Fishing. But he's a real big user of those, and he does really well on them. Um, I have caught a few brim on the muss, and I think it's a very similar technique to brim for the for to with then cranker crabs. But when it comes down to you know that particular lure, I'm not really. You won't find too many of them in my tackle box. I'll put one on if I do see a pylon that's got plenty of like plenty of muscles, indentations on them. So I'll throw it in there, and hopefully pick one off of a pylon using it. But other than that, I'm more devoted to the cranky crab than anything.
Yep. Any specific colors of the cranker crab that you prefer?
No, not really. Depends on where I'm fishing and how deep. Like I'll use the UV if I'm fishing, 20 meters. Um, say at
So,
Hawkesbury
so
on the bridge pylon there, or if I'm fishing out at Sandringham Bay, I'm using the sandy color.
yep,
If I'm fishing out at Molyneux Point, then I'll use the green motor oil color. Um, so it just comes down to where you're fishing. I don't really have a specific color that I'll always use.
yeah. What about along the Georges?
Yep. Um, yeah, that green color.
Yep.
The thing I can't remember what it's called. Motor
There's
oil.
a green one called Olive that I like.
Olive. That's the color. Olive. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a lot of bread and butter
Yep.
color ranges for a lot of lures. That like motor oil, olive kind of color. Um, and I think that naturally works better in like your darker water. Around bridge pylons, I'm a big fan of using that UV. So
Yep.
with the purple with the orange nippers, just something about that off color, the orange really turns them on, and gets the bite for me. But yeah, I'll throw all different colors to find out what they're going to eat, and go from there.
Yeah. I mean, there might be some truth to that coloration. Along the Georges, I can tell you at least around maybe for the majority of it, but I know definitely around say Como, Lugano, you've got those orange clawed crabs.
Mm, yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've
And yeah,
actually
those Brim crack those crabs hard if you can get a live one.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually just purchased like a few of the bigger models, so the 65 mil and the 9.5
Right.
gram. I was hoping to use them tomorrow, but my mates canned the Hawkesbury
Ah,
brim session because the tides are pretty crazy there at the moment. So, um, but yeah, I think that's what I'm going to be throwing to see if the brim are more inclined to hit the 65 mil cranker crab
yeah.
over the 50 mil. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and I'll get back. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean, they might be a bit scared. Scared of the
Well,
crab. The crab might bite back.
yeah, well, they say big baits get big fish, but and elephants eat peanuts. So, but
Yeah.
we'll find out on the 65 mil, I reckon.
Also, obviously, this is unrelated because we're talking about Georges and the Botany system, but what do you mean by the tides are a bit crazy in the Hawkesbury? So, from my understanding, I think, without checking the tides, top of my head, I think we're getting a high in the around 11 maybe tomorrow, roughly, and it's only about a 1.5. but at night it's about 2.1, I think. So it's a much higher.
It's about a 1.5 meter difference between tides. So
the change is going to be huge.
yeah, so the water is completely running. And I've checked the tide for comp. So we've got a comp there at the end of the month. Shout out to East Coast Bream Series. But we've got a comp there at the end of the month. So me and my mate Adrian, we're just pre-fishing it at the moment and just finding a few spots, finding what works, finding what they're eating, finding what doesn't work, and really just kind of like narrowing it down. So then on comp day we've got a really good plan. But the water, so the tide difference on comp day is about 900 mil, and the tide difference tomorrow is like 1.5 meters difference. So yeah, we figured we'd skip the session tomorrow, because if we did find a bunch of fish tomorrow, and it may be a bit different on comp day when we went back. So it's just one of those things that we really want to try and fish the right, I guess the right conditions, similar to comp day, to try and find where the fish are going to be sitting. Just I guess just as a pre-fish, how pre-fish works. But that's pretty much what we do. Just go around and try and scan up some fish, try and see what they're eating, and then move on to the next spot and go from there. So, but at the same time, we're always enjoying our fishing.
Yeah, I'm glad you explained it like that, because now it puts into context what you mean by that, as in it's not going to give you indicative results or an indicative idea of what you could expect on competition day.
Yeah, for sure.
But obviously, you're not saying that you wouldn't catch a fish. You're just saying that they're going to be in a different area, and there's a big reason why that would be plausible.
Well, we don't necessarily want to be thrown off, and if we're going to be catching, say, bream, say in the racks, on a 1.5 meter difference, they may not be there when the tide's a 900 mil difference. So, yeah, it's one of those things.
All right, next lure type, I think it was a surface, or a couple of surface lures. You see MMD splash prawns and the OSP bent minnow.
So yeah, just I mean over the next few months, as I said, you're looking at spring, and that's when the prawns come out. So and top water is one of those things you throughout the warmer seasons you always have in your tackle box. So kind of like mixing the two, so prawns and top water just kind of go. And OSP bent minnow, I think it's probably one of the better top water lures on the market for bream, and it's super fun to go and chase anything, doesn't matter what it is, to chase any fish on top water. So it's probably the warmer seasons is the better time to go chase them too. So
yeah, there's something about tying on a bent minnow, puts a smile on my face.
Oh yeah, every day, and just watching it get walloped as well. So yeah, that's pretty fun. That's pretty fun.
Would you throw it in the winter, or it's probably too low a percentage play?
Look, I seen somebody the other day pull out a 44 forker in the harbour on a top water, and it got me thinking. And I guess I was looking around, in the background, the photos, as to like what kind of structure they were throwing it around. So the it just looked like it was like a jetty or a bit of the fish markets or something like that. Maybe where boats are moored up against, and they're sitting high in the water column underneath these pontoons. So I don't know. I might actually give that a go. I might test that out one morning and see if they come on the bite on top water during winter. We'll just have to wait and see for that one as well.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's possible, but the window is very small, and also if it's a big bream, you don't want to waste too many chances presenting a bait that it's unsure of. You're only going to have a look, and then it's going to move on.
Yeah, definitely. There's not enough hours in the day. Let's just say that's true. Yeah, to go for a fish.
How would you work those lures?
You want to work them, I guess, pretty quickly. With your splash prawn, I like giving it 3 little twitches, so it like has a bit of a kick around on the top of the water because
So
it'll
so you
splash.
get a bit of a walk, just like a 3, and it just sort of
And then
walks a tiny bit.
Yeah, and then just pause it, and I'll tend to come up behind it or from underneath and have a go at it. So, but in saying that, you change it up. So you go one. You can really just work it quickly, work it slow, work it with a different technique every cast, or whatever the case may be. You're really in it to try and snare that bite, and you want to do as much as you can. In regards to like your OSP bent minnow, I like working them super quickly. So because they'll jump around and they'll go spazzo across the top of the water. If you're working it over a drop off, I like to pause it on top of that drop off or just before it gets to the drop off, because you're either got a brim sitting on the drop off or a brim sitting on the flat, and they're either or they're going to come up an opportunity to try and they'll either see it or don't want to miss out, and they'll hit it. So that's my technique in regards to the OSP bent minnow. You're always really just twitching your rod really quickly as you're winding, and it just bounces all over the shot and makes an absolute scene. And yeah, all the more chance Bream can't hesitate it and just come up and hook themselves.
Yeah, that's interesting. That lure, everyone's got a different technique.
Yeah,
Have
right.
you noticed that? Some people use it slow. I'm a slow twitcher for the bents.
Yeah, I like
And
smashing
then there's
it. I
others
like
which they smash it with erratic, sharp, hard twitches.
Yeah, at the same time, I'll change it up. So if the fast erratic twitches like isn't working, I'll turn into that slow twitcher every day of the week, just to change it up. And then if that isn't working, then, and I know there's fish there, then there's all the more chance I'll whack on like a lightly weighted soft plastic and fish under the top water. So. Or even I'll chuck on like a little shallow diving chubby, and slow roll that, and see if they're gonna come up and hit that.
All right, moving on. Is there maybe just one more lure type that you'd like to go over, whether it be a plastic or a diver, like a chubby?
What will you see in my tackle box right now? What will you see? Look, you can't go past the 2.5-inch grub.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's a good solid lure.
You're very
Gets
experienced.
The runs on the board.
Yeah. Look, it's. I think it's a bread and butter lure for a lot of fishers. So, lightly weighted, heavily weighted, doesn't matter. It dances around. It does its thing. It catches brim. So yeah, 2.5-inch grub, or sometimes in the winter time as well. So I noticed that a lot of different little minnows, seeing like a lot of those white bait come out, and I think they're feeding on a lot of different bits of white bait. So yeah, I'll chuck out 2.5-inch minnows a lot too, and do pretty good on those. So yeah, it's just all about matching the hatch at the same time. So if you can get that down and what they're eating at what times of the year, just take a little note down. I caught this fish on this day, on this lure, and then just chuck it in the back of your car, and then just continue writing down what you've caught on what lure at what time of the year. And I think once you start getting a bit of an understanding, you go back through. Yeah, sweet. All right. Yep. They're eating this at this time. They're eating this at this time. You can really tailor your lures to fit your session at what different times of the year. So
yeah, excellent. Let's move on. Let's talk about conditions. Conditions that may or may not affect how brim might bite on any particular day. So the main ones being tide, for example, rainfall. I think that's a pretty big one for me.
Yep.
And then there's others which may or may not make a difference: barometric pressure, wind, moon phase?
Look, my ideal day out on the water. Um, my ideal day out on the water would probably be just a hint of wind, probably a little bit higher, maybe about 15 Ks. I wouldn't mind 15 Ks at all. Like that there, in my opinion, really helps the water move. And if, as the saying goes, no run, no fun. So I'm a massive fan of that. I actually heard on a podcast a while ago, I cannot remember who for the life of me, but they turned around and said that they were casting 90 degrees to the wind and retrieving it 90 degrees from the wind. So if the wind was going this way, they were casting out either that way or the opposite way. And every time they did that, they were getting the bite. So the wind, a little bit of wind really helps the water move, especially down in the basin. And even in places like down in Como, if you've got your northerly, you're looking all right for a good bream session. You've got a westerly, you could probably you probably don't want to be throwing lures around Como. You probably want to duck around into the harbour, into Botany, and fish Sans Souci. Bit cloudy, overcast is probably my ideal day as well. Kind of helps the whole top water thing, and you can kind of set up your day revolving around starting with a bit of top water, and then as the sun comes up, you want to, I guess, go down further in the water column. I don't mind a bit of rain either. I'd actually enjoy a bit of rain on the water. I just feel sometimes it gets the bite if it's scattered showers as well, so it turns on and then turns off and then turns on and then turns off. I'll tend to fish like you're just above a drop off, so just before the drop off, you tend to find that your bream will come up off the drop off and smack a bait as it's coming over the top of it. So I'll only fish in like maybe 2 meters of water when it rains, and that really helps me. So, but yeah,
what about rainfall in the previous couple of days?
Then what I'll do is I'll stick around that clearer water. So if it's been like torrential, then I'll head more closer to Botany, and into like your deeper water, like Molyneux Point. There's that little bloody, what do you call it, Trevally Alley.
Yep.
That's got a really nice rock wall all the way around to the beach. You can just fish that and pepper that with like your gulp crabs or a cranker crab, and lose 50 of them like I have down there. If I was a scuba diver, mate, I'd be making millions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if it's been raining all the way up, to the day you want to go fishing, then I'd probably more look to fish your clearer water than anything, a bit more deeper. But if it's like scattered, it's not too heavy, it's light, then I'm more than happy to fish that shallower water as well.
Yeah, I find if there's been a bit too much rain, the Georges fishes completely differently. It just
Do you fish deeper or do you fish more shallow after that? Very curious.
I fish deeper and most definitely towards the clearer waters, down towards the bay. I find once you're upriver, you can be shut down for kilometers. Just complete.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I can't find the word. It's like a desert.
Yeah.
A desert river. There's nothing, and I mean, there's obviously fish in there, but it feels as though you're by yourself, and there's not a specimen of your intended quarry out there for you to catch.
No, that's it. I think when it comes down to it, I think it's just locating and understanding if you were a fish and you were saltwater predominant and there was a lot of fresh water on the top, where would you want to be? And I think if you can ask that and answer that question with a cracker theory behind it that makes sense, then you'll be able to find fish after it's rained. So, but yeah, that's my theory behind it anyways.
What about tide? I don't think we mentioned anything about that.
My opinion, in regards to tides, I'm a bit opposite about people's theories on tides. Obviously, being a tournament angler, I want to go out and catch the biggest bream that I possibly can. So a theory that I've come up with is like big bream leave last. So on a run in tide, I'll actually be fishing the deeper water under boat holes and a lot of bridge pylons. And then on a run out tide, I'll actually be fishing the flats, which it sometimes doesn't make sense. Obviously, a run out tide, like the very bottom of the tide, that's when I'll start heading out towards that deeper water. But coming up to that, I guess where the water is almost run out or getting close to it, I'll still be flicking in like a foot, maybe two, up to a meter of water, searching for that big bream that has just hung around there, and that's my theory, and it's worked for me. So big bream leave last, and the same for the run in. I'll always be fishing deeper water all the way up until the top of the tide. When it's slacked off, I feel as if that's when they've moved up and they start eating in the shallows or towards the bank.
I like that theory. Was there any specific, like, sort of experience that made you sort of feel that way, or is it just seemingly just one day it sort of just matched your experiences?
So me and Adrian were fishing a bunch of mangroves, and we got so caught up in how many big bream we were actually catching. We actually got stuck where we were because we were fishing this little section that was cut off by a sandbank. We ended up, because I only had like a little 370 tinny, we ended up pulling our boat pretty like out of trouble. But we're actually fishing the low tide in really shallow water. And we were just banging big bream, and I'm talking like mid-30s up in this one particular spot. And then it just kind of like, how were we catching so many big bream on a low tide in super shallow water? Like, how was that? And I kind of come up with that theory. I tried it again and it worked in a completely different spot. And then I tried it again, and then I just kind of like stuck to that theory ever since. And it's really worked for me and especially Botany. Like you've got places like Como as you come around the corner from the bridge. There's a really good fishing spot, land base there that you can go to the bridge and then walk around, and it's got a really nice flat. And if you fish there on a low tide and specifically target bream, I've seen some big bream get pulled out of that specific spot too. So, that's just an example as to like, you know, where I've done really well on the bream, and how I've been able to, I guess, really tone in trying to find that big bream. But yeah, that's another thing that I really enjoy about bream fishing, is just trying to find the biggest one.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. All right, now let's move on and talk just a little bit about gear. I mean, most bream anglers sort of know, what we're talking about when it comes to the sorts of line classes and all that. So we'll just be, brief with this.
In regards to gear, so I 2500 size reel or a 2000 size reel. I'm not. I would buy a 1000 size reel. I've been looking to really want to buy a 1000 size reel, but the gear that I've got is 2000 and 2500. I like to really cover all bases. I don't know if it's just me being the overthinker that I am, but I like to take out, I guess, 5 combos with me. So I've got 2 plastics rods. I've got 3 plastics rods. I've got 2 long ones just for really long casting, 7'6" on both of those. I've got a 6'10" Gen Black 1 to 3 kilo. That's primarily for like intimate styles. So like if I'm using a plastic, within the mangroves and I'm skip casting, or I'm doing something like that, then I'll use that. I've also got myself a hard body rod, so 7'6" in feet, just the cheaper version. Honestly, I prefer the taper, the slow taper, and just the 7'6". Just everything about it's really good. Works for me. I've also got a 6'8" real slow taper rod as well. So that's for like throwing down cranker crabs at boat holes, or whether I'm chucking like the muss as well. Anything with like a treble that's super close to me, then I can chuck it down and not be afraid of pulling hooks. So in regards to reels, the only thing that I've ever really changed within the reels that's been super specific for me was my Infeet X. I think it's Infeet X reel, the 2000 size. It's a 4.8 ratio. So I've put that on my Infeet and I've loaded it up with 3 pound straight through fluoro Unitica, and primarily it's just for slow rolling cranks, and just getting out little small hard bodies and just kind of getting distance on them, and then so as I said, with a 4.8 ratio, just super slow retrieve. That really helps me fish that little crankbait just that extra bit slower, and to put it right in their face for a bit longer.
What about lines and leaders?
So a lot of my line I was using 0.4, which was probably about 8.5 pound, 8 to 8.5 pound breaking strain. Though I've just recently changed all of my rods over, besides my straight through fluoro combo, to PE.6 Varavas. So casting braid. It's a light blue. It's a bit darker than your J Braid Grand, but the casting on it is really good. All of my stuff that I get from Complete Angler. So it's one of those things that's like they've been really helpful to me as well in regards to not only just like the gear, but the information that I get out of the boys that work there. Dane, I've mentioned him before. He works there, but a lot of the gear pretty much all the gear that I get is from there too. So Varavas PE.6, can't go past it. Probably the best subtle, smooth, easy casting, not tying, absolutely perfect. Probably the best braid in my opinion that I've ever used.
And about leaders, I believe you said that you're a very firm thinker in the thought that light matters.
Sometimes. Like if I'm skip casting into the mangroves, I'm not going to whack on 3 pound. That's just a wish of being snapped off every day of the week. It just comes down to like, I guess if you can plan your day, you know what system you're going out. It's like, yep, I'm going to do here. I'm going to do here. This is where I'm going. I've got my 2 big plastic rods, so it's either 7'6" or it's a short rod. There's nothing in between, like no 7 foot, 7'2", nothing like that. It's either long or it's not. So I either know where I'm going to go, so I'll tie up my leaders knowing that. So if I go out for the day, I'm not going to tie on a 4 pound and then rock up to a bridge pylon. I'm gonna know exactly where I'm going, and I'm gonna tie my leaders to complement that. So if I'm going to Tom Ugly's bridge, I'll put on like 8 pound on like my short rod just to put on a cranker crab, and chuck that down, and because I know there's heavy structure there. If I'm fishing a boat hole, then I'll probably whack maybe like your 4 or your 5 pound leader on. Very rarely will I ever have to go to 3. I have done, and I didn't do too bad. I mean, it was because I was struggling with the bite, and I just whacked that on just to get that bite, and it really worked for me. So I guess always be thinking, and about what's going on around you. And if you're not getting the bite, change something. So, and that day was the leader and it come off. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Jason Wilson, thank you very much for, sharing your knowledge and, coming on the Shroom Live. I think I learned a lot about the Botany Bay Georges River system, and I think the listeners and viewers, of course, because this comes out as a video as well as audio, they're absolutely going to love this one. So
I hope so. I hope honestly, my goal in life is to get those kids out there and to get them onto fish. And even anyone really. Just I listen to any podcast about any type of fishing and just be a sponge and just take whatever I think is a good theory for me. If you're confident with your fishing, then you're gonna crack fish every day of the week. So, but thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
yeah, not a problem, Jason. So I'm just going to ask you, is there, any supporters that you'd like to thank, just that's contributed to, your fishing journey?
First and foremost, Complete Angler. I'm down at Minchinbury, but Minchinbury, Gregory Hills, and the Illawarra store. All my gear is I get from either of those three stores. Yes, I still buy it. But I work there. So shout out to those guys and the boys that work there. Shout out to the missus for letting me go fishing tomorrow. Thanks, babe. Shout out to Adrian, the guy I fish with. We are always going to be. So we are Team Complete Angler and Camping World Minchinbury, but we will always be known as the Nautic Hunts. Moving on, when it comes down to a lot of my knowledge, I think a big shout out to you, Shroom, because a lot of what you do for the fishing industry is really good in regards to getting the entry level kids in and showing them how easy it is to go out and bank fish. All they need is a pack of plastics, jig heads, and a combo with some line on it, and they're on. Bit of understanding and a lot of information goes a far way. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much. Oh, beyond the banter as well, I've got to give those guys a shout out. It's a mental health organisation for the lads. Just been really, really supportive over the past few weeks. But the things that they do, really good guys to chat to. So go give those guys a follow on some social medias as well.
Awesome. And don't forget those wonderful blokes that got you out of that, that little jam when.
Oh shit! Shouts to said Southeast Diesel Specialist.
Awesome.
I definitely got to shout him a case of beer very soon.
How can people get in touch with you? What are your socials? My
socials. So I have a YouTube channel as well. I started it just before me and my partner fell pregnant with my first baby. So my Castaway. It's a bit of a funny one. Type in My Castaway on Instagram and follow the link on there, because if you type it in on YouTube, you're just going to get a bunch of Castaway movie scenes. My last name's Wilson, so that's why I did My Castaway, but I didn't think of it at all. Also, I'm on TikTok as the Bream Reaper, so the Bream and then Reaper. So that's me on TikTok if you want to search me up on there. But yeah, other than that, I'm pretty sure Shroom will put me links in the bio down below. So come over, have a look, message me if you need any questions asked. More than happy to help. Or pop into the shop. More than happy to help too.
There we go, ladies and gentlemen. Another podcast. Jason Wilson talking about Botany, Georges River Bream. Hope you guys enjoyed this one.
You.
On the Shroom Live podcast, this is your host, Shroom, signing out.